Thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to chat with everybody out there. So what we'll be talking about are the design aspects related to this standard K factor. First of all, what is the K factor? And it's been around quite a while. It's the ratio of the study hour volume to the average annual daily traffic. So it's just the hourly volume compared to the daily volume. Bottom line, where we're going with this is the department is moving towards a design approach with the treatment of the K factor. And the idea is we'll be working with predetermined K factors based on area type and facility type. Question often comes up, what's the level of service on a given roadway? And when you think about it, there is not a specific level of service. It really depends on the time of the day. In one case we could get A, in another case we can get E for the same roadway. There's also the problem of working with measured Ks. In that last graphic, if we're working with K factors, what we're actually measuring are capacity numbers, the maximum volume that can get through in a given time period. So frequently on our major highways, our freeways, and major arterials, they back up many hours in a day. And so the K factor keeps on dropping. So to a large extent, we're not really measuring demand volume, we're just measuring what capacity is. So we get very different conclusions depending on the operating conditions of the highway and on the different analysis periods. So where the department is going to, excuse me, is a design approach in which we'll have K factors set for planning through design. They won't vary in planning. They'll be the same as what we use in project development as well as in design. It would be a similar concept to what we do in design with 12-foot through lanes. On major highways, we always design towards 12 feet. Well, should it be 12 and a half on our freeways where the trucks are, 11.5 on lower speed major highways? And probably so, but we don't do that. What we do is we set the standard at 12 feet. Reasonable numbers for the purpose. And that's what we would be doing with the K factor now. Rather than making it a variable, we would make it a fixed number based on area type and facility type. What I did here was simply present the predominant K factor that we would be working with in the urban and urbanized areas. Essentially, it's 9%. The way to think about this 9% is that would be about a typical weekday peak hour volume compared to an AADT. So, yeah, it's a typical weekday volume. That would be the way to think of it. And it's approximately 9%. There would be two cases where we would use lower values. One would be, let me call them core limited access freeways, and then the other one would be in these multimodal designated areas. So these core limited access freeways, these are the ones leading to our major downtown areas, our 7 largest counties. And so for instance, I-95 in Miami-Dade and Broward, what we would do is rather than have that 9% value, we would go to an 8% value. And what this largely represents is the department accepting a multi-hour peak period approach. Rather than a single hour, it's going to about a 2-hour peak period to evaluate, plan, design our freeways in the major urbanized areas. It's up to the districts to determine the exact values of what these core freeways are. The other area would be in certain areas, communities that are really designing towards a multimodal network with an emphasis on bicycle pedestrian transit, that we want to support that, and we would accept lower K factors in these areas. Essentially, that would allow lower speeds for a greater amount of time period for automobile traffic. And the value we would be working with there is a 7.5%. So typically it would be 9%. By going to the 7.5%, we're essentially accepting about a 3-hour peak period in these usually they'll be downtown areas. So let me just run through a couple of the quick benefits of this standard K process. We don't have to rely on traffic studies. They're set. They would promote better transportation policies and projects. Essentially, we're respecting that our more dense urbanized areas should have lower K factors. We wouldn't have to spend as much time discussing, arguing, getting agreement on what these K factors. Sometimes on major facilities it could take up to 6 to 9 months getting Federal Highway and the state to agree. We could use that for other purposes. It's consistent from planning through design. In the urbanized areas, it'll be 9%. Whether anybody goes to planning or design or project development, the number's fixed. It's simple to understand. There's not a lot of calculations. And I kind of like this one. If you're familiar with K factors, we say 8.23%. And we think that's 1/100th of 1% we're saying we're using here. Where traffic volumes vary by 10% and historically use this false precision. So 9%, we're rounding off to the nearest 0.5%. It was a couple of folks and I submitted a paper to ITE, the National Journal, and it was published in November. And this was the response from the managing editor of the ITE Journal. And unanimously positive. The first time the editor has ever seen something like this submitted to ITE. So what I'd suggest is not only is this it's a new idea, but I think it's very well accepted in the engineering community. How are we going to implement it? And hopefully many of you are familiar with the Florida Traffic and Highway Data Online tool and the DVD that the Statistics Office provides. So essentially, this is coming out next month, I believe. The new online tool, anybody would click on whichever road you're looking at, and there will only be one K factor, and it will be this new standard K. Whether the inside or outside the department, there would only be one number featured by the Statistics Office, so there's not that confusion of what K factor to work with. So it should be coming on board next month. It will have a K factor for every roadway segment in the state. And again, we'll get that consistency. For those of you in design, I actually think you won't see too much difference here. Essentially, we in design get the information from project development. Project traffic procedure, and they provide it to design. So I don't think you'll see much change in your work. As far as changes that occurred in the PPM, rather than we removed the reference to K30, 30th highest hour, design hour. We removed those references, and we just made reference to the K factor. And what that K factor now is the standard K. We didn't say standard K, we just referenced the K factor. This is a new process that has not been used anywhere in the United States. So we've done a lot of coordination over the last couple of years with the districts and many offices in the central office. This had to go through division office of FHWA as well as headquarters. We've worked with Florida, the Florida section of ITE to get the word out as well, local governments and others. So it's been a big communication effort, and again, I kind of appreciate the opportunity to speak to y'all today too, to get the word out further of the new things coming on board. So that was a brief presentation on the standard K. Ben?